Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today I want to give you a quick introduction how we can access our Kubernetes cluster. So the plan for today is we're going to focus mostly on the demo, and there I'm going to show you a dashboard. I'm using AKS Desktop today. Then we are looking at the CLI, Kubectl, but there we also look how we can create an alias and also autocomplete. And in the end, I'm going to show you an open source tool named k9s that might also help you manage your cluster and also make it easier for beginners. As always, if you're interested in the slides or the presentation, you can scan the QR code, or you will find the link down in the description below. So let's talk quickly about the tools we're using, and then we switch over to the terminal. The first tool I'm going to show you is AKS Desktop, which is an open source dashboard built by Microsoft. It is built on top of Headlamp, which is already an open source dashboard, but AKS Desktop brings additional features, especially for AKS, like the name suggests. This means we can have RBAC control, we can log in with our Azure user to get the connection to the clusters, and we can also create new clusters from the dashboard. You can find the project on GitHub. It's currently in preview, but I didn't have any problems in the past, and there are every couple of weeks new versions. So I think it's a great tool to get started if you're looking for a dashboard, especially since a dashboard just lets you click around and lets you explore what a cluster contains, especially as a beginner. Then we're going to take a look at the CLI. Kubernetes has the CLI Kubectl, which I'm using for all my demos because it's the default CLI for Kubernetes and it's very expressive. For example, if I say Kubectl get pods, then everyone knows that I'm displaying the pods. Then what I'm going to show you today is, in my demos before, I always typed Kubectl and then the command. So it's a lot of typing. And today I'm going to show you how we can use an alias on Windows and Linux. So you can set the alias to, for example, K, and then we can just write K get pods. And since it's an alias, it will be transformed into Kubectl get pods. And we have to type vless. And I think also in my demos, I use a lot of copy paste because I mistype Kubectl quite often. So this will be also gone. Also, I'm going to show you how we can set up autocomplete. So we can say, for example, Kubectl get SE, and then just hit tab. Then we get service account, service, and everything else that starts with SE. So this also can help you to just find out what resources are there without knowing much about Kubernetes. Then lastly, I'm going to show you an open source tool. It's called k9s. It's a terminal tool for Kubernetes. This means we're going to install it, and then we can start it in the terminal and use just terminal commands and move around inside the terminal. What's great about k9s is it's free, and it's available for almost any operating system. So with Windows, we have Linux, Mac, Fedora, like it's a really long list. So I think every operating system you're using, you should find a k9s version for it. Also, as I said, it's open source, and so you can find the code and the documentation on GitHub. Today I'm going to show you just a quick introduction and some commands, but there's also a cheat sheet on GitHub or on Google with all the commands. And I think once you know them, you can navigate quite quickly through your cluster. But that's enough of theory. Now let's switch over to the terminal. Let's deploy a AKS cluster, and then we take a look at the tools. Before I get started, I'm using AKS because I'm just an Azure guy, but you can use any Kubernetes cluster you want to follow the demo. With that said, let's switch to the terminal and let's get started. All right, here in the terminal, let's define first a couple of variables. So that's the resource group, the location, and the name of my AKS cluster. Then we're going to create a new resource group where we're going to deploy this AKS cluster in. And once the resource group is created, now we can create our AKS cluster. As you can see, I just leave it as basic as possible. I only provide the name and the resource group, and that's enough for today. As I said before, you can use any Kubernetes cluster you want. You just have some limited features since AKS Desktop is for AKS, but you can use it with any Kubernetes distribution. So creating the cluster will take around 5 minutes. So I'm going to stop the video now and we'll continue once the cluster is finished. The cluster has been created and the last step is to download the credentials so we can access the cluster. So this is everything you have to do to set up an AKS cluster. Now you can check how you can access it. So the first tool I want to show you is AKS Desktop, the dashboard. So let me open it. And there you can see we have an overview of all the clusters I have in my kube config. As you can see, most of them say they have a bad gateway because they're old clusters that don't exist anymore. And we can see the one cluster we just created. If you click on this cluster, we can see here a bunch of warnings. This is probably because the cluster was just created. The container takes some time to start. And what's great about the dashboard is, especially for beginner, I can just click on the various menu options and I see what resources there are. Especially in the beginning, there are so many Kubernetes resources, it's hard to learn what they are, how they work, what they do. But I can just click through it. For example, I see here a pod. That's something you hear usually first. I have an overview of all my pods. I don't have to care about what namespace they are, how to access them. I can just click on them. I get some basic information, some events, some conditions. Then I can also take a look at the YAML file so I can see the configuration. If I close this, I can also open the terminal or show any logs. I don't have to know any commands. I can just click around and explore what I have going on in my cluster. What's also great is we have here this map. And this map gives you an overview of all the namespaces and all the resources you have in the namespace. This again helps you just to figure out what is running in the cluster without knowing any CLI commands. So I can just click on this kube system namespace and I can see I have here different applications and I can click on them and I get even more information. And I can also see here how they are linked together. Because if you're using Docker, you know you have a container. But in Kubernetes, the equivalent of a container is a pod, but usually you create a deployment. And the deployment creates a replica set, and the replica set creates the pods. Once you know it, it's easy to understand, but as a beginner, it can be hard and a lot of information, but here you can see exactly how they are linked together. I have my deployment, I have my replica set, and I have my pod. Again, I can click on them and see all the information about the resource. So this is some feature from basically any Kubernetes dashboard. What AKS Desktop also brings is the AKS features. So we can authenticate with clusters that have Entra ID authentication. So we have Azure RBAC, I have to log in with my user, and then I can securely access my cluster. Also, we can click here on create. We can create YAML files. We can change the configuration. So we never have to leave the dashboard. And lastly, what I want to show you is how to add a new cluster. As you can see here, I have all my clusters from the kubeconfig. So by default, the tool reads the kubeconfig file, but this means you have to have like kubectl, or if you're using Azure, the Azure CLI installed. But what's great is if you have an AKS cluster, you don't need these tools. So what I can do is, if I'm logged in, as you can see, I'm logged in here with my user. So you can see my tenant, my subscription. I can just say here, add cluster from Azure. Then it's checking all my subscriptions. Here I select the subscription I want to use. Then it's looking for AKS clusters inside the subscription. And there you can see I have two different ones. So the first one we added for the demo and another one that already existed before. This is using Enter ID authentication. This means my user has to log in and I can only see what permissions my user has. So for example, if I'm only allowed to access a specific namespace, then I can only see this namespace in the dashboard. I'm the administrator of this cluster, so I will see everything, but I can select this and then click on Register the cluster. Then AKS Desktop also suggests if I want to install some extensions, for example, the Azure Monitor, which would create a managed Prometheus instance, I can install KDA or the vertical pod autoscaler. So all of this can be done from within the dashboard. Since I don't want to do anything, I just click on Done. And now I see in my list this new cluster. If we click on this, we see again as before the same information. If we click here on the map, we'll see a bit more because there are more resources in the cluster. But again, I can just click around, I can search here on the top, I can filter, and especially for beginners, it's very easy to just get around. All right, so once we're done with the dashboard, now let's move over to the CLI kubectl. Back in the terminal, if you have watched any of my videos, you probably have seen me using kubectl, so we can type kubectl. As you can see, I can't type and already misspelled it. Then what we want to do, for example, get, and what object we want to apply this. For example, pods. So we get all the pods in the namespace default. As you can see, there are none. So we can check what namespace we have. We do a kubectl get namespaces. As you can see, we have only 4 namespaces. And I think everything is inside this kube system namespace. So I can do a kubectl get all and provide the namespace kube system. And now I can see everything inside this namespace. But as you have seen, every time I want to execute a command, I have to write kubectl. Then probably every second or third time I misspell it, so the command won't work, which means it's a lot of effort for me to do the same over and over. So what we can do now is we can set an alias. So in PowerShell on Windows, we can use set alias, then what name we want to use, for example K, and what it should represent, that's the value. In our case, kubectl. This means if we now write K, PowerShell knows we mean kubectl. So we execute this, and now we can do K get all, for example. And you can see we get everything inside the default namespace. So this makes it a lot easier if you work every day with Kubernetes, because you just have to write the K. What we can also do is to get some autocomplete. For example, if we do a K get SE, then we could have a secret, a service account, and if I hit tab, nothing happens. So now let's configure this autocomplete. To do this, we need 2 commands. So first, it's the kubectl completion PowerShell. And to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what it does. I just got it from the Kubernetes docu. So if any one of you knows it, please let me know in the comments down below. But for now, I just copy paste it from the docu. And the second one is also the register argument completer. So if I use K, then I want to complete the argument I have. Again, it's from the docu. I don't know exactly what it does, but it works. And from now on, we can use autocomplete. So if I write K get SE, then I can hit tab and it gives you secrets. I hit tab again, service accounts, I hit tab, I get service, CIDs, networking, KDS IO, whatever that is. But This is something I just learned, so I can take a look at it. And without the autocomplete, I wouldn't know about it. Now if this set up, it works great, but the way PowerShell works is everything is contained inside one session. This means if I close PowerShell, reopen it, and I type k get all, I'll get an error message because PowerShell doesn't know what k is. And to fix this, to have it like all the time, we have to add it to the profile of PowerShell. To do this, we open the profile, for example, with Notepad, and we use the variable $profile. So this opened Notepad on my second screen, so unfortunately you can't see it because the file doesn't exist, and it asks me if it should create the file. So if you get an error message, or it doesn't ask you this, then you can also create the file with the new item command. You just say it's a file, and the path is the $profile. So once you've done this, you can just execute the Notepad profile command again, and then we'll see you have the file open. Here you now paste the code. It's basically the same as before. So we set the alias, then we load the kubectl autocompletion, and then we just register the argument completer. You don't have to worry about the code. It will be in the description down below, where you can just copy paste it if you want to try it yourself. So now we are going to save this file, then we are going to close it. And as you can see here, I just tested it. Now I can either restart the terminal or PowerShell, or I can just use this .profile to reload our profile. So I execute this, and now we can test if it still works. So we can do a kubectl get se, then I'm going to hit tab, and I can still get all the different variants of se. All right, great. So now this works on Windows. Now let's switch over to an Ubuntu Linux, and let's configure it there. I've already prepared my Linux VM. This means it's connected to the Kubernetes cluster we've created before. This means I can do a kubectl get all, and I'll see what's inside this cluster. Setting up the alias is actually easier under Linux, but for the autocomplete we have to install one additional tool. And this tool is called bash completion. We can just use apt install and install bash completion. There you can see it only takes a couple seconds. And as you can also see, I've already installed it. After this, we can set the alias for kubectl. So we just say alias k equals kubectl. So as you can see, it's way easier than under Windows. And from now on, we can do a k get all, and it works as before. To configure the autocomplete, we can also use just one line command, which is again simpler as in Windows. And all we have to do is execute this complete command. As before, I got it from the Kubernetes docu. So I'm also not a Linux expert, and I'm not entirely sure what it does. All I know is that it works. So if you know more about it, please let me know in the comments below. But once we execute this, we can now use autocomplete for our kubectl commands as well. And with this, it's now time to switch over to the last topic of today, the tool k9s. So let's clear up this window. We can use Windows or Linux, it doesn't matter. Since I'm already connected to my Linux VM, I'm just going to use this one. So first we have to install it. Here it depends what operating system you use. The best would be you go to the GitHub page of k9s, and you will find the description or instructions there. For Linux, we're using a wget. Then we download k9s, we install it, and it should only take a couple seconds. Here, as you can see, I've already the newest version installed. Once you have installed it, we can easily start it with the command k9s in the command line. So all we have to do, we type k9s, and this starts the tool. When you start the tool, it displays the view you looked at the last. So before I started the video, I was just clicking around, and as you can see, I stopped at the deployments. And now moving around is a little bit tricky. So take a look at the documentation. There are a lot of shortcuts, but for now, I just want to give you a very high level introduction so you can know at least the basics and get around a little bit. First, to execute a command, we hit the colon sign. This opens this kind of terminal inside a k9s, and now we can type what we want. For example, if I type ns or namespace, I can see my namespaces. So I hit enter, and now it switches over to the namespace view. Also, something I forgot to mention is on top here, we see some basic information about our cluster. For example, what Kubernetes version we are using, how much CPU and memory the cluster uses, and also the name and the user we are connected to. So right now we have here our namespaces, and with the arrow keys we can just move around. For example, if you go to the kube system and we hit enter, we can go inside this namespace. Then we have all our pods there, and now we can filter. There is a whole bunch of shortcuts, so you can filter or sort by name, by state, by amount of pods. But for now, let's click Shift and S. And as you can see here, now we are sorting by the status. If I click it again, it's just sorting it descending and ascending. We can also use the right arrow to move over and get more information. Right now I'm more zoomed in than I usually would be, so you can see it on the video. So if you try it out yourself, you should see more information at once. But with the arrow keys, just left and right, and you get all the information that's there. For example, the IP address, memory, on what node it's running, and so on. Right now I think we're displaying the wide view. So by default, it just gives the normal view, but with Control W, you get this wide view, and then you can see all this information. I actually now see more than before. So we also have the labels, and it ends with the age. All right, so now we see the pods, we get some basic information. We can click on the pods, then we can see what images are running there. If you click there again, we can see the logs, the events. We can again move around, so we can see what's going on without knowing any commands. So we don't know kubectl get logs or get pods. We just click around. If you want to go back, you use the return key. You use the escape key. And with this, you can just go further up. Now, if you hit colon again, we go to deployments, but as you can see, it also gives you suggestions. So if I type D, it suggests daemon set, or we want to go to deployments today. So here you can see the deployments. We have only Kubernetes internal stuff or AKS internal stuff, but now we can also interact with them. For example, if you go to this metric server, and if you just say that's my application I want to work with, I can scale this application or this deployment now. All I have to do is I hit S, and then it asks me how many replicas do I want. So I can just replace this with 3. I say OK. If we hit enter, then we can see a third pod is being started right now. The last thing I want to show you is if we again type in colon to open the command line, and if you go to secrets, now I can see all the secrets inside this namespace, and I can just press X, and this displays my secret. So again, I don't have to know kubectl get secret commands, get the value of the secrets. I only have to know the commands for k9s. So I could print the cheat sheet, and I can navigate around the cluster quite quickly. I'm not really using this tool, but I think if you use it regularly and you know the commands, it can be very efficient to get around the cluster. And it can also be great for a beginner. I think the dashboard is the best tool, but for beginner, you can still move around. You can see what's going on there. And you have to know the basic objects we have in Kubernetes. So if I know pods, that's great. If I know deployments, I can take a look at them. And from the deployments, I can click on it. I see the pods. I can click on that. I see the image. If I click on that, I see the logs. So I can move around without knowing too much, and I can explore the cluster. This is everything I wanted to show you today. A bit of a different video. I just want to give you an introduction in the different options we have to access a Kubernetes cluster. Especially as a beginner, Kubernetes can be quite overwhelming because you have to know so many objects, how they interact with each other. And I think the dashboard is the best way to get started with Kubernetes. You can click around, you can explore what objects there are without knowing them, without needing to know how to get to them. You can just discover what's going on. The second best option for a beginner is probably k9s, although it's an additional tool which can be complicated again. But you can also click around in the UI or in the terminal UI. You just have to know the basic resources we have. For example, if you know that there's a deployment, you can display all the deployments and then just click through it until you reach the logs of an individual pod. Lastly, the tool I'm using most is the kubectl, because for demos, it's the easiest to show what I'm doing, to help people who watch my videos or attend my trainings to understand what I'm doing. And it's also easy. I just copy paste my commands in a text file, upload it on GitHub, and you can just copy paste it from there and use it yourself. What's also great is if you set up the alias. If you use it regularly, typing kubectl is a lot of unnecessary work. Many characters, as you've seen, I mistyped it all the time. So if you set the alias to, for example, K, it's way easier to use the kubectl. I hope this video was useful and you learned something about how we can access our Kubernetes cluster, and I hope I will see you next week with another video.